Welcome back, guys. So today we will discuss the resource attributes in our OpenTofu series. So far we have discussed the installation, we have seen the what are all providers, we have seen the documentation, we have seen the variables and its types, right? So today we will see what is resource attributes, right? Resource attributes is nothing, right? Let me show you one command here, tofu show, right? So it will just show you like what is the your infra looks like, whatever you have declared, right? Whether it is there or not, right? So here you can see this is the resource, right? And under this resource, this is the provider I am using, and this is the resource name, the logical name. And whatever that you see, these things, right? These are the attributes of that particular resource, right? Here you can see let's say this random pat. So random pat is the resource, right? And under this, I have a logical name. That resource name is my fave, and this my fave is having some attributes like ID. It is this one, length, prefix, separator. So this is nothing. This is a resource attributes, right? And why we need that resource attribute? Let me tell you. So far, what we are doing is we are just putting our whatever the value we need, right? Let's take an example of that. The first file, right? Basic file. What we were doing, we were saying that okay, this is the file we need to create, and under this path, and this will be the content of that file, right? Then we realize, okay, this is not the good because there the this data, right? This data must be kind of dynamic, so that if tomorrow we need to change that, then we can do, right? Then we have discussed the variable, right? And under variable, again, that what we are doing is we are deciding that what will be the content of that particular attribute or the variable or the argument, right? But with the help of resource attribute, what we can do is we can grab the output of that particular resource attribute, and we can give that output to a different resource as an input, right? Let me rephrase myself. What I'm saying is resource attribute is whenever we want to take as an input from an output of one resource, right? Using these attributes, what which I have discussed, like let's say ID, right? This is something that we call as a resource attribute. So we can define that resource attribute as an input for a particular resource, right? Which is literally a output of a different resource, right? Let's say we have something called this example we will take this random pat, okay? So random pat will obviously will gonna generate some string, right? Let's say ID attribute we will take, right? And this ID attribute, whatever it is defining, right? We will give as a content, right? As a content to our local file, right? So this way that we can define whatever the defining resource attribute ID, which is a attribute of something called random path, whatever the output will gonna generate it, that will feed as a content of this local file, right? So what we will do, let's create a new file here. We call it as a resource underscore attribute dot tf. Fine. So here, let's start this. Let's start with the something called random pet, okay? Random pet, and I will say the pet, okay? And I will start this. I would say the prefix, let's say I'm gonna set it as a master. I would set the length equal to, let's say, 2, and the separator I would again a hyphen. Fine. So this way that we have this, right? Now what I will do is I will define another resource, something called local file, and here I would say pet underscore file, right? And the file name, okay? File name. Let me copy the file name from this so that we don't need to type such long. Copy, paste, and I will just name it to a pet.txt. Fine. So far we're good. Now, when we say content, right? So here we are not gonna feed the content from the variable. we are not gonna feed this content from the file itself, right? What we want that whatever the ID attribute of random pat, that will be the input of my content, right? So here we say random pet generated is okay, and you can define it as a dollar sign. And how you can define, you just need to say random pat, then you need to set that what you call it, attribute. Okay, so here what I am saying is this will be the content, right? This is something that the fixed, right? But this can be changed, right? Or it will be changed, right? Because what I'm saying is random pat, it is that the resource, right? Resource dot logical name dot attribute, and which attribute we are getting? The ID. Now you will say, okay, how we'll come to know that which attribute we need to put, right? So whenever you have this kind of requirement, right, what you can do, just let me cut it, save it. What I would say is tofu plan. So here you can see that this is something that will be generated, right? Will be created. It is saying ID, right? So this way you will come to know, okay, what all attributes a particular resource is generating or creating, right? Here you can see ID, length, prefix, separator, and everything, right? Let me put it here and I will save it again. And now if I'll run the tofu plan, so here you can see that it is generating this ID, right? And this will be applied to our, I would say tofu, apply, auto approve. Done. Now let's say, so this you can see that it has generated something called master.tight.loiness, right? So here you can see Uh, okay, it was destroying. Maybe some resource was removed, but here you can see that keen dat momot, whatever that weird name is, right? So you can see random path generated is this is something come from here, right? But what is this, right? This is you can see that this is the output of this resource attribute, right? You can see. So this is a resource attribute, guys, right? But here there is one thing, right? Let me show you tofu, then I will just explain this what I want to tofu destroy, right? So here it will gonna destroy everything, but what I just want to show you, because we have that many file, right? So what it is trying to do is it is just trying to uh, uh, removing everything, right? But I just want to see that pet. Okay, where is the pet? Here it is. C. If I scroll up to the output of the previous, so you can see the dependency, right? Like whatever we have defined, that OpenTofu will smart enough, right? It will automatically find that, okay, what resource is depend on what, right? Because here we have generated this and then we have this, right? If I'll type it in reverse order, right, then also what it will do is it will gonna first create the random path because that is the output of this file, right? And then it will gonna create it in different format, right? And when we are destroying it, right, it will follow the reverse order. First it will delete that thing what was the created last when it was created, but when we are destroying something, the last thing created was destroyed first. Okay, so that you need to understand. But this is something called a dependency, and OpenTofu will gonna follow two type of dependency, right? This is a resource dependency, we call it resource dependency. Okay, one is something called implicit, which we are not defining, right? Which is something dependency, and another one is explicit dependency. So here implicit is something that which OpenTofu will automatically find its way, right? It's find the dependency. Like in this example, we have seen that, right? That this will be the thing for this, right? That way we can see. If we generate again tofu apply, so it will not do anything, right? But what I will do is, let's say I will cut it, I will paste here, right? And I will change this length to 3, right? Now let's see. So what it will do is it will gonna replace that, right? I would say yes. So obviously first it will destroy that, which this file pet.txt, right? It was destroyed, and then according to the order, if we see, it has to create that first. What? It has to first create this local pet file. But you can see first it is creating this and then it is creating the pet file. Why? Because it is saying that, or it is saying that due to the implicit dependency, this resource is depends on this, right? So that first it will gonna create this and then it will create the local file, that pet file, right? So that's what that implicit is, right? Explicit is something when you are instructing the OpenTofu, boss, create that this resource first, right? Remember on the very first day we have discussed that the scenario in which we will see that once we start our AWS project with the OpenTofu, let's say you have that web server and DB server, right? You are defining that web server first, right? And then you are defining the DB server configuration. From the OpenTofu perspective, there is no dependency because from the OpenTofu, it just need to create two servers, right? Because OpenTofu will create your infra, right? It is by default, it will not look inside the server whether your service is running or not. OpenTofu is responsible only to create your server. If you are defining something, then that it will do. It will not responsible whether that particular service is will gonna run or not, right? So from the OpenTofu perspective, there is no dependency it can see, right? So due to the implicit dependency, what it will do is it will first create the web server and then it will create the DB server. But that's wrong, right? Because web server will not serve anything until unless the DB server is up and running, right? So we can define here that okay, web server is depend on the DB server. So in that way we are instructing, okay, you need to follow the explicit dependency principle, right? And you need to do what? You need to do this one, right? So let me show you that as well. Maybe let's create a new file here, 05 underscore I would say resource dependency.tf file. Okay, let's quickly copy it here and I will paste here. So I am just creating this, right? So here I am saying random pet generate. I will not put anything. Is I would say here we are learning explicit dependency. Okay, and here I would say depend.txt. Fine. And here I'm just creating some this one. Let's say 2. Okay, and we need to change this obviously, right? So I would say my underscore pet. Fine. So if directly we run, it will first create this pet file and then it will create this pet value, right? But what I want is I want to OpenTofu first create this and then although there is no dependency, right? But due to this example, just to understand this concept, what I'm saying is do one thing. For that, we have something called depends underscore on keyword. And here, what we can do is we can define that again, the same resource attribute random underscore pet dot my underscore pet. Fine. So now what will happen is this resource depends on this, right? Think from this perspective. let's say this is a web server, right? So what I will say, depend on DB server. So what it will go do is it will go and first create the DB server and then it will gonna create this, right? So let's see in action now. Tofu apply. Okay, there is some typo was declared. Yeah, obviously this right. This logical name must be unique every time, right? That is why. So let's run it again. Okay, so now you will see what it is doing is first it will create this, right? Will be created and will be created. See here what it will, we are just saying that, right? But it is not implementing it in the real time. What it will do is it will be created, like first it will create this and then it will create this. Looks like same way, right? But here, what is due to this explicit dependency, the moment you say yes, what it will do is first it will create the random pet, right? But if you see the order here, the order was first local file and then the random pet, right? But the moment we say yes, okay, go and create my object, it finds that okay, we have some explicit dependency, right? Then what it has done is it has created this. So you can see it has created the random pet first and then it has created the file, right? So that is that implicit and the explicit dependency, which is very, very important whenever you are using a real-time infra, right? Like you have that 2 or 3 tier application running, and those application maybe is dependent on each other, maybe the DB, maybe the firewall, right? Maybe the application, right? So those stuff first need to be created, right? And then you can, so these the behavior, right? You can control with the depends on rule, right? So that's what that we have. I think that's it for the day. In the next video, we have a topic called, maybe we'll take one more thing here. There is a sometimes what is the requirement is, let's say you have that you are creating some resource or maybe the IP of that particular server, right? And you need to get that output, right? To store somewhere or maybe to send somewhere, right? So for that, what we have is we have something called output, right? And let's say I want the output of my pet. Fine. I will gonna define this. What is the value, right? Again, we need to use what? We need to use resource attribute, right? My pet, which attribute? The ID attribute, right? You can define the description if you want, otherwise it is fine, right? Now let's try to run one more time and let's say yes. So here you can see that it is showing earlier it was not there, right? You can see there was the output and here it has created and it's done, right? Under this there is nothing, it gave us a prompt. But this time after this it is showing me as an output, right? And there is one more way, right? You can call it from this, right? Tofu output. So you can see that tofu output, in the output it's a kind of variable, you can say, right? This block, we are what we are doing is we are doing this, right? What you can do is if you want to do a particular, right? If you know that particular, if you have multiple outputs, let's say, right? Multiple outputs you have, then what you can do, you can define that particular name of that attributes. So here you can see it is just giving you the value of that particular attribute. Earlier, it was saying, okay, what all outputs we have defined, because in this case we have only one, so it is showing one. If you have multiple, then it will show multiple. And here, if you want a specific output result, right, you can define that tofu output and that the name of that particular output, whatever you have defined, and it will simply show you the value of that thing, right? So this is something that it will just display your output on screen, and later also you can call it with the tofu output, right? I think that's it for the day. In the next video, probably we will gonna discuss the life cycle rules, right? Like how that particular behavior, again, that thing is behavior, right? So I will take a pause for today. So in next video, we'll see what is life cycle rules. All right. So yeah, I think you find it as informative again, right? Because now we are moving ahead. We are going deep dive into the tofu, right? So each day we will gonna learn. Again, this code will be pushed to our GitHub, right? And you can clone from the same repo. All right. So I'll take a leave, guys, and thank you. Thank you for being with me. Bye bye.